Explorations. Probing global diversification. We travel the world so you don't have to.
Hi and welcome to Explorations. Today we will learn about the Trumpeter Swans.
And we're talking here about Trumpeter Swans and their future, and as in particular with LaSalle Park in Burlington.
Right.
I've heard about the plight of the Trumpeter Swans. I know that they're not doing too well, but are they rebounding at all? Or are they doing better now than they have been in the recent past?
Well, they're doing much better than they have in the recent past because they were extirpated from the province. So they weren't here for 96 years. They were hunted to extinction in Ontario. So the fact that we have 800 now is a real success story.
Do you focus on Trumpeter Swans only, or are there other species in your sites as well?
Well, I'm an environmentalist in general, and I got into this battle because I'm a fairly successful environmental advocate. And the Trumpeter Swan Restoration Group, who are the people who actually have worked with the swans for 32 years, needed help with this issue at LaSalle Park. So I'm rather new to the Trumpeter Swan game, but the way you do advocacy is the same no matter what you're fighting for.
Right. So maybe you could tell us a bit about the tale of the trumpeter and why it's in trouble.
Well, the Trumpeter Swan was widely dispersed throughout North America. It's the largest swan in the world. It has a wingspan of 8 feet. Wow. And it was hunted for its meat, it was hunted for its feathers, and it was even hunted for the leather of its feet, which was used to make ladies' purses. So for all those reasons, they were hunted to the point where they were almost extinct. Now, in Ontario, they actually did, as I mentioned, go extinct. They were extirpated from the province. The last one was shot by a hunter in Long Point in 1886. And so for 92 years, or 96 years, whatever it is, they didn't exist here. And they were brought back by a retired Ministry of Natural Resources biologist named Harry Lumsden. And he decided he was going to try and get some eggs from elsewhere, because there still were a few in Western Canada, and bring them here. And so that's how the program got started, and that's how they were reintroduced to Ontario.
So tell us about the importance of this LaSalle Park location. Why is it so important in the survival of the swan?
Well, LaSalle Park has more Trumpeter Swans overwintering there than any other site in Ontario. So over 200 Trumpeter Swans, or a quarter of Ontario's population, spend their winters there. So Trumpeter Swans pair up during the summer, and they find little isolated lakes in northern Ontario and northern Quebec to lay their eggs and raise their young. But then in the winter, they congregate. And they congregate because winter is a social time. And that's when there's mate selection going on. That's when the young males are trying to figure out who's boss, that kind of social behavior. And so they congregate. The problem is there's been catastrophic losses of what would have been Trumpeter Swan winter habitat. In southern Ontario, we've lost more than 95% even of the original marshes. There's probably not an inch of land around the Great Lakes that hasn't been altered. And so they have very few places left to go. And that's what makes LaSalle Park so important. Originally, when they were here, 100 plus years ago, they may have migrated down into the United States to some of the big wetlands along the coast. But again, those wetlands have been altered beyond description or destroyed. And so this is also a reintroduced species that's still trying to find its way. They don't have a history because they came from eggs from Alaska, actually. So they don't have a history of migration here. And they've just been slowly trying to spread out a little bit. And why LaSalle is so important is because for whatever reason, they selected it as a home. And it suited them very well for the last, since 1993.
So what is it that they're doing at LaSalle Park that's screwing things up?
Well, there's plans that might cause a major impact to the Trumpeter Swans. So LaSalle Park is actually owned by the city of Hamilton, but rented by the city of Burlington, who has it's a complicated thing, a joint venture agreement with a thing called the LaSalle Park Marina Association. Now, that's a private entity, and they've run a marina there for several years. But the marina that they've run, everything has been temporary. So they have a floating break wall to stop a lot of wave action during the boating season. And they have 240 marina slips that are all removed from the water over the winter. So even though this marina has been there, it hasn't impacted the swans because it's not there when they get there for the winter. So the marina operates during the summer, and then the swans come in the winter, and the marina is all out of the water, and the break wall's out of the water. But now what the marina would like to do is to build a permanent break wall, which will be more than 400 meters in length. It'll cover virtually the entire mouth of the harbor. It'll involve the dumping of 10,000 tons of rock into Hamilton Bay. And they want to add another 120 slips, and they want to make them all permanent. So 340 permanent slips plus this break wall. And of course, the whole point of a break wall is to stop wave action into the harbor. Well, what keeps the harbor open for the trumpeter swans in the winter is the wave action. So if you build a permanent break wall, then the real fear is that harbor will freeze up for long periods of time over the winter, and the swans won't be able to get to their food. And it's not just the swans. There's so many other water birds, waterfowl that overwinter in LaSalle Harbor. They share that space with a lot of other animals.
So the fact that you're actually involved makes me think that you can actually do something about this. How hard do you think it's going to be?
Well, these battles are always hard because there's always private interest pitted against public interest. And in this case, there's a private interest that's very determined to get this marina built. And so far, it seems that there's a lot of political interest in seeing it built. But most of the public still doesn't even know about it because the public consultation on this issue was really badly done. And so we're still talking to people who, a year and a half into this have no idea that this is being planned. So we're working on getting the public informed, but we've also asked, there was an environmental assessment done on this project, and it was very poorly done in our opinion. We wrote a 17-page report on what we felt were some of the problems with the environmental assessment. And when we got an inadequate response to our concerns, then we asked the Ministry of the Environment for a Part 2 order, which is basically asking them to demand a higher level of environmental assessment. And so that's at the ministry right now. They have entertained that, and they are working on it.
So the ministry was responsible for this environmental assessment?
Well, the ministry is they didn't do it, of course. The people who did the environmental assessment were the people hired by the town and by the private entity that runs the marina.
Oh, okay, so it could be rather one-sided, I would think.
Well, that's always the problem with these things. So the ministry does have responsibility to overlook these things if there's a request made. And we're not the only ones who made the request. Conservation Halton as well had concerns about the EA and asked for a Part 2 order.
Now, we spoke at the beginning there about your role in this. You say you're an environmentalist. How did you come to be personally involved with the Trumpeter Swan?
Well, I have a friend who's with the South Peel Naturalist, and she knew Bev Kingdon. Bev Kingdon has been part of the reintroduction of the Trumpeter Swan since it began in 1982. She was one of the original people who had farms in Northern Ontario who were recruited by Harry Lumsden to raise some of these trumpeter swans. And so she let me know that there was this issue with the trumpeter swans and said I needed to meet Bev, and then I met Bev, and then I met the trumpeter swans, and I couldn't help but get involved. And so we've been able to bring all the major environmental groups in our area in Halton region together to fight this. So it's the Trumpeter Swan Restoration Group, Oakville Green. I was the full-time volunteer president of Oakville Green for 7 years. Burlington Green and Milton Green are all in this together.
Does this take up a lot of your time?
Yes, but that's okay. Some things are worth fighting for. Right. And the Trumpeter Swan is certainly a magnificent, beautiful, iconic bird. A bird that was, on the brink of extinction. In fact, in 1935 in North America, they thought there were only 69 individual birds left. That's how widely hunted this thing was. Yeah, the fact that it survived at all is a miracle.
Yeah.
And they're so beautiful, and so many people enjoy them. One of the things that gets forgotten about is there's 340 boaters that they want to accommodate at this expanded marina. There are thousands and thousands of ordinary citizens who go to LaSalle Park to see the trumpeter swans, to see the other waterfowl. Hundreds and hundreds of photographers go there. It's one of the few places where you get an unobstructed vista of the lake. It's a gorgeous spot with gorgeous birds, and it deserves protection.
Do you feel any sympathy from any of the boaters?
I have nothing against boaters, and I have nothing against marinas, and I have nothing against that marina. That marina has coexisted with the trumpeter swans for many years. So it's not about us versus the boaters. It's about, let's be sensible and protect something that needs protection. I mean, how many times can you bring a species back from the dead? You can find another place to park boats, and you can find another place to expand marinas. But this is a swan that's had an incredible comeback story, and we need to take that into consideration.
So how do you, excuse me, Moy, how do you go about in this fight? I mean, is it lobbying? Is it letter writing? Well, obviously you got to get the message out somehow.
Right. So there's a lot of different venues that we pursue. Obviously, one, as I told you, was with the ministry requesting a Part 2 order, and we're very appreciative that the ministry is looking into that. The other thing is talking to the local councillors, because ultimately this will be a decision of the Burlington City Council. It will be up to those politicians to decide whether to go ahead with this or not, unless, of course, the ministry says no to it, which is unlikely. They'll probably put things in place, but they won't necessarily say no. But it'll ultimately be a decision of the council. So talking to the council and getting them to understand the issue is part of it, because I think there hasn't been a good appreciation by most of the council about what is really involved here and what is really at stake. And the other thing, of course, is to talk to the public. So we've had a family day at LaSalle Marina where we invited the people to come out and meet the trumpeter swans, and that was fantastic. We had hundreds of people over the course of the day. We've done some really good public outreach. We've had people knocking on doors in the community, giving them brochures so they know what's going on, directing them to our website. We're holding a Swan Stories Day on the 29th of May, and we're going to be telling some really great stories about the trumpeter swans, because there are some really amazing, if they were people, really human interest stories with these swans.
Swan interest stories.
Swan interest stories. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've noticed that in other parts of the world, when they want to preserve certain animal species, often people have never seen them or met them or had anything to do with them, and once they actually see them and have some kind of tactile involvement with them, they suddenly have a change in perspective about the whole thing.
Absolutely. And the wonderful thing about these swans is because they're originally raised by people, and people have been working with them all along. Bev and her crew do the banding and tagging, and they also take blood work from the swans. And so they're working with them all the time, and they're used to being around people. So these are animals that you can get pretty close to. You need to be a little cautious because they have an 8-foot wingspan, but they're basically pretty used to being around humans. We were there at LaSalle Park not too long ago, and there were some tourists from China. And I don't know how they got to LaSalle Park, but there they were. And they couldn't believe these beautiful birds, and they were taking all kinds of pictures with them. And the woman was thrilled because she was actually able to stand right next to the bird to get pictures taken. And she said, in China, you could never do this. Wild animals would never let you close. And they were so excited. But that's how everyone reacts to these animals, because they're just so amazing and so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned some of the events that you've got planned for people to get involved. Is there any other way that people can get involved?
Well, I'd love for people to go to our website, because everything you ever wanted to know about this issue is on there. And that is www.trumpeterswancoalition.com. I'd love you to get in touch with us through email, and that's trumpeterswancoalition@gmail.com. coming out to the event on May 29th at the Central Library in Burlington. If people are in the Burlington area, that would be a great way to get to know more about the swans and also, what you can do to help. But the main thing, anyone living in the area, in fact, even people not living in the area, because let's face it, these birds do not belong to the city of Burlington. These birds belong to the people of Ontario, and they belong to the people of North America, as a matter of fact.
Well, really to the world when you think about it.
Right. They're not Burlington's birds. So anyone who has any interest in it, I urge you to write the City of Burlington, and you can write the City of Burlington at COB, so City of Burlington, but just the initial COB at burlington.ca. And just let the mayor and council know that you want to make sure that this habitat is preserved for the trumpeter swans and for the enjoyment of future generations.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Liz. A worthwhile project, I'll tell you that much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
For more information, please go to the TrumpeterSwanCoalition.com. For Explorations, I'm Nina Hilger.